Three. And hello, this is Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. And my guests tonight are Kennedy Cooper, as beautiful as ever, and the equally lovely, well, almost equally lovely Brooke Binkowski, because Kennedy's hard to match.
True.
How's everybody doing tonight?
Actually, yeah, better than expected so far. I shouldn't even say this. I shouldn't even say things are better than expected, but like things are not popping off like I was afraid they might so far today. Tomorrow might be a different story. Tonight might be a different story, but so far
no verdict, so we'll see.
Yeah, who knows how long that verdict will take. I feel like if I ignore everything outside of my personal bubble, then I'm like, yeah, all right. But if I just pay attention to anything else at all, then not so good. Kind of awful, actually.
I'm developing this new interest, and I don't even know what to do with myself about it, in fashion and makeup. And like I've always been a total I never liked makeup, didn't care about fashion, nothing. And now I'm like, oh my God, I've been missing out on so much. That's my mind sort of like, looking for some kind of out from all this other bullshit, because everything is so fraught. Where at least with makeup, okay, yeah, the history of makeup and fashion is equally fraught. But if I apply it to myself, then I can just distract myself for, an hour or two when everything else is just so damn heavy. I mean, yeah. I look absolutely like painted up the end. I can't do it for shit, but it's still a nice distraction when the video games and the books don't work.
Hey,
it's fun and it feels good to just, catch a glimpse of yourself and think, yes, I look nice today. I did that. And just let that be a little distraction for the rest of the day.
Exactly.
Plus, makeup YouTube seem to get lots and lots of followers faster than political YouTube. So you may have an option there to build up social media clout with a sideline.
Honestly, I'm going to be doing some of that.
I wish I could, but nobody needs to see mine. I just end up with just like I could do like really bad makeup, but then talk about politics really well, maybe. But it would just be like, fuck the man.
Well,
that has appeal.
I mean, you could do the political makeup stream the same way you've got all these political video game streams out there.
Oh God. No, but you know what? I think there's people who do that already. I know there's this one chick. I don't know if she's doing it anymore, but last year she would debunk stuff. It was a really good idea. I wish I could have thought of it, but of course she did. Like the execution was great. So she would just put on makeup, and like by the end of it, she'd have this great like face full of makeup. She'd be like, "And that's why what you believe is bullshit." It was just great. It was like this very sweet debunking, and she looked real pretty too.
That's a really good combo.
I thought so. Yeah, it's something again. I wish I thought of it, but I didn't. There's all kinds of, dude, I don't know what's going on, man. The fucking this quarantine, or not quarantine, but the whatever is going on, like everything has turned me into I've been watching there's this YouTube channel. I don't remember the URL, so bear with me, but there's this YouTube channel that does nothing but compare vacuum cleaners.
That's exciting. That's exciting.
I can't believe it. I was like, no, please, whatever. Who watches that? And then I watched it, and I was like, ooh, my pupils got all big. I'm like, look at what it's doing. I watched it for like an hour. It was mortifying. So yeah, this is what's happening. But it's still an improvement from last year, the year before, the year before that, the year before that, the year before that, and the year before that, and also the year before that, and probably all the other years before. No, there were some good ones in there. But definitely the last 5 or 6 years have been garbage.
So one story I will mention, simply because this is the right group to talk about something weird like this.
Oh, cool.
Mainstream media has not mentioned it a lot, but did you know that we didn't have a flu season this year?
I did. Yes, I did. Because everybody's masked up.
Everybody's doing all the things that people were supposed to be doing to stop from getting COVID, stop from spreading the flu as well. And you know what probably made the biggest difference? Is closing schools down.
Oh, I thought you meant
because what spreads the flu is kids who don't get serious symptoms spread it around among each other at school and then come home and make their parents really sick.
That
Right.
sounds
And then
familiar.
their parents spread it around at work.
Yeah.
So closing down schools for COVID and all the COVID safety restrictions basically prevented flu season. So everybody was saying, well, it's no worse than flu. Well, we may not have saved all the COVID lives that we wanted to save, but we saved all the flu lives.
Yeah. And God knows what else. I mean, who knows what's floating around out there, what we're going to be seeing in the next couple of years. But yeah, I mean, there's that. Like, I noticed that last year too. I used to get sick every October or November, like clockwork.
Mhm.
I would get this lung funk that stayed for 3 weeks. And last year, I didn't get it at all. And I was like, oh God, I always thought I was pretty hygienic. You know, I've been pretty good. Like I shower, I wash my hands. Like I'm not a neat freak, but I'm not unhygienic. But I guess I was, because I've not gotten sick at all. Granted, I'm not around as many people for obvious reasons.
Well, that's the biggest part, though, because that's your biggest vector is other people.
Boy, biggest vector for a lot of shit, like terrible attitudes.
Well, there's a line. One of the first things that made me laugh when I started reading that sort of thing is very early in Emma by Jane Austen. Mr. Woodhouse observes of children, they spread disease. Because he's telling his daughter why she shouldn't actually marry Mr. Knightley's brother at the very beginning.
Oh man, that's great. Yeah, I used to affectionately, mind you. I like kids, you know. I mean, there's some parents I could do without, but like kids are all right. But yeah. Oh, it's true. It's like dogs. I love dogs.
Well, it's like the Conways. The Conway's daughter seems like a wonderful person, but I have no use for either of her parents.
Oh, the worst. I know, and I'm so like, I feel so protective toward her as well. I mean, I don't know who I've only seen some videos, but I'm just like, your parents are fucking terrible. Like, yeah. I mean, what is this? Why do we all have to know this drama with like why do we have to know this drama with naked pictures and her mom, and like, we didn't need to know this. Do you remember that, where her mom like put up a picture of her naked allegedly, but I don't know if she actually did, but then Kellyanne Conway is just like making a big deal out of it, and everybody's like, I mean, it's just, you guys are sick and unhealthy.
Well, she claimed it was a mistake. And it's just like, first of all, even if it was a mistake, you should handle your shit better than this. Like, because that's a serious mistake to make. And sure, it is a mistake that someone could make, but you should act like, oh, this was terrible. My God, not like, oh, it's not a big deal. It was just a mistake. Just quit asking questions, basically. That was the
Conway said, Kellyanne Conway?
Yeah, that was basically Kellyanne's attitude towards it was a mistake. Stop asking questions. It's not a big deal. These things happen, whatever.
Nobody has ever made the press more curious by telling them it's not a big deal.
Yeah. Oh, she's doing. Oh, it's so gross. I mean, and okay, when I say something's trashy, I don't mean like trashy as in, the way like rich snobs use it. I mean like tacky and gross. And
yes,
pretty much every trashy person, well, with a few exceptions, has been, fabulously wealthy. This is trashy, and I really hope that
it's like the lowest brow person that I can think of off the top of my head is Donald Trump. I mean, if there was someone who was more low, I can't think of anyone more low class. And he's right up there, part of the ruling class and everything.
The ruling class is disgusting in every possible way. I've been thinking about this. Oh no, you got me started, Chris.
Here we go.
Well, this is why we have you on, Brooke, so I'm not disappointed.
I'm always mad, I'm just like so pissed off. It's like all these things are like self-evidently, like clear. Like, okay, so I've been reading this book. I finally finished it because I kept having to stop reading because I was so pissed off. I mean, I've been reading a lot of books like that lately. This most recent one was Betsy Hartman. I've read a lot of articles by her, but I've never read a full book. And this one was called Reproductive Rights and Wrongs, about the history of population control, and it's, how it crisscrosses with fertility concerns and population and reproduction, fertility, all that. And of course, it always comes down on the women disproportionately, and always impoverished women, and almost always impoverished women of color. Like it just, the system could not have fucked women any better. I was gonna say it couldn't have fucked women any better if it had been set up for it, but of course it was set up to fuck us all. But like one of the things that shone through in this book, even though she doesn't really talk about it explicitly, Hartman, was, and just what I've known over the years, and all the things we've seen, even in the last like couple of weeks, is how all these like eugenicist types, they seem to also feel that the bodies of the very young belong to them, right? It seems to be like they just seem to be.
Well, on that note,
been thinking about it a lot.
Glenn Greenwald.
Oh no, what's he doing now?
Glenn Greenwald yesterday was caping for the fascist anti-COVID restriction crowd. Got into it a little bit with Hector Oseguera, a radical Democrat candidate from last election cycle from New Jersey.
All around fun and great guy.
Who of course, he and I both ended up ratioing Greenwald in that thread, which I'm still happy about. But
he's a great guy. He's radical. When you say
Oseguera, yeah, he's a great guy. Okay. He's a great guy.
When you said radical Democrat, I'm like, is that like a radical centrist?
Well, he uses radical instead of socialist because his neighborhood is Cuban. But he's a socialist.
Okay, cool. That makes sense.
I mean, he is one of those 2 or 3 people who don't call themselves socialists, who I can't call anything else. Along with Donna Imam.
Who?
Donna Imam, who ran in Texas in 2020 and who doesn't call herself a socialist, but who totally is.
I know her. Wait, do I know her? Well, anyway.
She follows me. You've probably seen her tweets in my stream. She's very, very smart. Lots of good stuff.
Nice. All right. I'll check her out if I haven't already. Sorry.
Yeah, she's
and forgot her name. I'm really bad with names. Sorry, go ahead.
She gave up a career in computer engineering to go into a nonprofit because she thought she could save the world by sending kids to school. And she found out that nonprofits can't send all the kids to school because that's not how the system works. And
well,
so she,
if they fulfilled, their obligation.
Well, no, exactly. So she started coming up with plans. Well, how could we get everybody to school or get everybody health care? And decided she was going to run. And she came up with stuff that was at least as good as Bernie's, and in some cases left of Bernie, all on her own without any sort of theory background or any sort of policy background except what seemed right to her.
Right. It just it seems to me like all of these, well, it doesn't seem, it is, there's all this shit being derided as socialism when it's common sense. You're the one who's one of the biggest proponents, right? Along with me, of pay people to stay home.
Yes.
Stop with this bullshit, with this lockdown, unlock, send the kids, don't send the kids. And then there's like something going around today about how we should stop wearing masks outside.
Yeah. And Greenwald was comparing mandatory vaccinations and mask mandates to the Patriot Act.
Of course he was.
Shameful.
And when Hector pushed back at him, he went off on Hector with, well, you're just like the Hector Osegueras of that era were saying the Patriot Act would be okay because it would keep us safe. And it's like,
what country does
totally
Glenn
missed
live in again? Remind me. What country does Glenn live in again? Remind me.
Brazil.
What's going on in Brazil lately? Remind me.
Same thing here, but worse. Because they've had even fewer restrictions. He made a genuflection in that direction, but it's just so to see someone equate the Patriot Act with COVID restrictions,
just disgusting.
Unironically, is pretty disgusting in the first place.
It's just so frustrating because I'm all here for having nuanced conversations about authoritarian things,
Yeah.
or potentially authoritarian things. I think that now obviously all of the talk of this type has been completely speculative and not based in reality, but I think some of the wildest talk about vaccine passports didn't sound good at all.
No, the
And
vaccine
so
passport
if somebody wants to have a reasonable conversation, I'm here for it. If you want to say it's the same as the Patriot Act, what are you smoking? The Patriot Act is this wide-reaching, horrible thing that is just, I mean, but all these people are hypocrites. I mean, Bush himself was in the news this week saying we need more lenient border policy.
Laws.
To be
that
fair,
guy. Obama was worse. Yes, Obama was worse.
While W did promise to build the fence, he actually built less of the fence than Obama did.
Yep.
But he founded ICE.
W's comprehensive immigration reform included amnesty for everyone. See, that's the
but
thing.
He founded ICE.
Is that the Bushes? Yeah, but he had this insane idea that it was actually important to keep terrorists out. And you have to understand that W is not a profoundly intelligent man. I mean, and that's really, I hate to say it, that's really what these Republican consultant types love, as long as they'll listen to them. They dream of people as dumb as Ronald Reagan and W and Donald Trump. And the only reason they turned on Trump is because he wouldn't listen to the smart people.
I would have, before 2016, I would have honest to God pushed back against this. I would have been like, no, it's more nuanced than this. Now I'm just like, yeah, no, fuck, look at this shit. Look at this shit. Okay, there's Kinzinger, I guess, who seems to say he pushes back against disinformation. And
yeah, but he loves Russiagate disinformation.
Oh, does he?
Oh, yeah. So here's the thing to remember, and this is what gets to me. So, yes, we know there are two or three specific things that Russia did to interfere. But as far as the collusion goes, all of the actual evidence suggests that Donald Trump's people were trying very, very hard to collude with the Russians. And the Russians were mostly just playing them a game and swindling them and not doing anything to help them and trying to get stuff from them without actually giving them any of the direct contact or collusion that they wanted. All the approaches to the Trump campaign are these sideways approaches between people who have total government deniability.
I mean, if the goal was just to get some trolls on Facebook, I think they could have done that a lot easier than colluding with Russia. They could have just gone on Fiverr or whatever,
So Russia has their own shit going on there.
And the things that Russia did do mostly struck me as being along the lines of the sort of thing we do in Russia anyway. I mean, keep in mind that we're trying to, at least to our own people and as much as possible to the Russians too, we're trying to pass off Alexei. Sometimes I dress up like Hitler, Navalny, off as a genuine Russian opposition leader and potential hero of the Republic.
Can you tell me a little bit more about this Navalny thing? Because you're the second person to bring it up this week. I've heard these rumors. I have never seen any proof, but that doesn't mean they're not credible. It just means I have not looked for it.
Navalny,
because other shit's been going on.
Do you remember Vladimir Zhirinovsky?
No, but remember, I'm terrible with names.
Okay, so Vladimir Zhirinovsky started to be a thing when Yeltsin was still president.
Oh, Jesus. How could I remember that far back?
He was very, very hardline nationalist, very, very right wing. One of those Russians who you look at and you say, I know there's a lot of propaganda about Putin, but these guys really are a little bit Nazi. Zhirinovsky was one of those guys. He was very nationalist. A lot of the relief at seeing Putin succeed Yeltsin because there were people who thought Zhirinovsky was going to succeed Yeltsin, and Putin was Yeltsin's guy, so we thought we would be able to get along with Putin the way we got along with Yeltsin.
I see. Oh, geez. Yeah. Okay. So one of the things I've cursed myself for over the years,
But Navalny
has been not
is
learning about this shit.
Navalny is a Zhirinovsky type nationalist. He's very Islamophobic.
Oh, really?
He has
God
said
damn.
very aggressively unpleasant things about getting all of the non-Russian people who are in what's now technically Russian territory because of those Soviet republics that didn't break away from Russia, and deporting them all to various countries that did break away, that are Central Asian and Turkic in their mainline ethnicity. So he's not a good guy. He's basically their version of, oh, who's that guy who beat Steve King and turned out to be a Nazi?
I can't remember, but
The kid in the wheelchair who turned out to be just a horrible Nazi. Madison Cawthorn, that's him. So basically, Navalny is like Madison Cawthorn, but a few years older and no wheelchair.
Oh, that's a shame. Really? Okay, but then if he's that bad, then why is Putin apparently starving him out?
Okay, so Putin is against opposition, number one. And number two, Putin is against opposition that has U.S. help.
Oh, well, yeah. But I mean,
and let's face it, the U.S., for as long as we've been messing around in Russia, the U.S. loves Russian or Russian affiliated Slavic Nazis. They loved Stepan Bandera during the Cold War, after World War II in Ukraine, who was a quote unquote Ukrainian liberal who had teamed up with Hitler to try to create a Ukrainian republic during World War II. The Croats were in what became Yugoslavia. Well, what was Yugoslavia when the war started? The Croats were deep in bed with the Nazis when everything started. But people like Navalny are very, very, very. So you have to remember that Russians are true Russians, the quote unquote real ethnic Russian, which actually is an ethnic Ukrainian these days.
Oh, God.
Is part Viking. And that's what makes the Russians Russians. The Rus were the Slavic tribes in what's now Russia who had mixed with Viking invaders who had colonized some of the big cities and rivers.
Sorry, I'm trying to get comfortable.
And those were the people who started the actual big Russian monarchical state in the Middle Ages, was what we would call Ukrainians now.
Yeah.
And both Russians and Ukrainians with lots of blonde and blue-eyed heritage have a tendency to be a little Nazi adjacent sometimes in their politics. Remember the people who we backed to throw out the Party of Regions in Ukraine, Tymoshenko and her bunch. They were pretty Nazi.
Were they? God damn it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was never, I had very little interest in all this shit until 2016, like almost none, because it's not that I find it uninteresting. It's, I like geopolitics. It's just that these are the types of sort of on the ground political like details that, you have to really work to, you have to do a lot of reading and fighting. So I was doing all that stuff, but about the border, I'm like justifying it because I feel bad about myself.
Well, it's like if you're focused on American Nazis on the border, it's easy to miss some of the European bunches. There are some that are obvious, and there are some that are not so obvious.
It's so fucking disappointing.
We don't talk a lot about Russian internal politics anyway.
That's true, and that has been some of my really good friends over the years have been have had expertise in Russia for various reasons. And they've mentioned similar, they're like, you just don't learn about this. And of course, I immediately tuned out. I'm like, oh, whatever, it's not about the border. I could learn so much. But like, they would lecture me about this. They'd be like, you should really learn more about Russian politics. There's a lot that's going on. Like, it's really interesting. And I learn all right.
Russia has this whole thing about encirclement.
Ah, okay.
And it's Russia now Putin thinks of himself as Louis the 14th.
This was going to be my question. I was going to ask you what you thought Russia was going after.
Putin feels like Russia is surrounded by all its enemies, that the U.S. has deliberately hemmed it in, and that, I mean, there are three things that...
Which it has, by the way, which NATO countries have on purpose.
There are three things, regardless of who is in power. There are three things that the Russian state has always wanted, foreign policy-wise, which is an ice-free port on the Mediterranean, which they have right now in the form of their one naval base in Syria, which is why they're not planning to leave Syria anytime soon, because that's their one warm water port. They're not going to give that up. The second thing they have always wanted is a European buffer between them and Germany and or Poland, because historically they have either been invaded by Poland or by Germany through Poland.
It seems like they've succeeded in kind of winning over Poland, though, lately.
Well, they've been doing some stuff there, and they've been trying to establish that buffer.
Right.
And that's why Ukraine is such a big deal. If Ukraine really joins NATO or really gets nuclear weapons again, then that's just basically telling Putin, no, we're not ever letting Russia recover from what we've done to it.
And then we can party like it's 1999.
It doesn't even really have to be that extreme. I think even just Ukraine cozying up to the US / the West at all is just like, even without like any dramatic overtures politically, that alone is enough to just sort of like put them on edge, it seems.
Well, the whole reason that the Party of Regions was so heavily supported by Russia was because Putin wanted Eastern Ukraine, the part he's occupied now, to be that buffer for him.
Right.
And the Party of Regions was all for autonomy for local groups and local government and devolution. And that was something that worked very nicely within Putin's plans for Europe, because you'd have, instead of one de facto Ukraine to invade Russia through, you'd have to go through the main Ukraine and then the eastern part, which was semi-autonomous and sort of on Russia's side. And then the third thing they've always wanted is they have always wanted a secure and stable Western border, so that they can focus their energy on developing their north and east, which is much more developed than it used to be, but they would still really like to have the kind of Pacific. They would still like to have the kind of Pacific trade that they used to have at in the old days when Port Arthur was a thing.
I like how I'm going.
Vladivostok. They want Vladivostok
all my
to
social
be Hong
skills,
Kong.
so like this is enough. Oh, sorry. There's a delay. I'm as I listen, I'm trying to point my good ear at you because I can only hear out of one ear. So I'm like, speak up, somebody. Sorry, it's really distracting for me to be able to see myself. If I could minimize it, I would.
You have to get used to it after a while. But it's weird.
Like
it's weird at first.
Yeah. And I know I don't do it enough to get used to it. And I don't I don't know. I feel like I guess I am a primate. So anyway.
We're all primates.
Yeah.
I used to go to the local zoo and, sit there with the orangutans, because the orangutans like to interact with people. And there was one in particular who had been somebody's pet, and she would come up, she would recognize me. because I went there. So I had a pass. I live right by the local zoo, and they offered discounts, like heavy discounts, to anybody who lives locally. And so I used to go do, when I was in college, I would go do my homework there, and I would sit at the primates were, and there was this place where you get this gigantic beer. So I would just sit there and just drink beer, do my homework, and watch these, the bonobos and the orangutans. Anyway, after a while, I started to realize after, first of all, I started watching primates. Then I started watching the people watching the primates. I was like, I can't believe there's people who come here every day just to look at the monkeys and the chimps and the apes and the orangutans and blah, blah, blah. And at some point, I don't know how long it took me to have this realization, I realized that I'd been sitting with the weird primate people for months. and that meant that I was one of them, and it was great. Actually, it was great. They were all lovely people. I love them. But it was very funny, because I was just like, who's watching who here, right? Like, I don't think there's a lot to do in those zoo pens. So I'm pretty sure that we're offering much more entertainment for, for these creatures than for they are for us. But yeah, at the end of the day, we're all primates. Yeah. And over time, although the San Diego Zoo, which is where I live, San Diego, as you know, they're very responsible with pet steward or with animal stewardship. They do research and so on. But man, over time, I'm starting to turn into like, I realize there's places that need to be there for animals that have been, domesticated or are half feral or half tame and turned over. But other than that, I'm starting to like get really kind of weird about zoos.
So
they're a weird thing.
They're what?
They're a very weird thing. I mean, I think that there's a real importance to the idea of taking an active ownership of like life on this planet, and like at the best of times, like zoos like sort of exemplify like a good side of that, where you have like excellent breeding programs and things like that go on that keep the, creatures from going extinct and things like that. And especially in the face of climate change, I think it's important that we be thinking that way to some extent.
There's another important use for zoos. During the Great Depression, when there were serious food shortages and nobody could buy anything because of runaway deflation, they shot the animals in the Central Park Zoo and gave the meat for free to the poor of Manhattan.
Oh man, that's a
situation.
Yeah.
Woo.
Oof, yeah.
Yeah, that said though, I think a lot of
we need to make fun of wet markets less is the takeaway from that.
I don't make fun of wet markets at all.
I know. I'm just saying, for everyone who has been, we need to make fun of wet markets less because of our own history during the Depression.
For sure. And sorry, Kennedy.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I think that's a great point, Chris. All too often we like to think of ourselves as above certain things here in the United States in particular. And if you actually go through history, it doesn't really bear out.
If you actually talk to people who live in some of these major urban centers, they'll tell you there are wet markets here too.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
And that they're for the same sort of rich people who want a thrill.
Yeah.
Because
do you know
as we said earlier, the ruling class is trash.
I didn't even finish talking about that. I've met filthy rich people over the years because
well, you work in journalism, so practically all your colleagues are trust fund brats.
Oh my God, dude. Actually, yeah, pretty much. There was the weird thing is this was a really striking thing. I worked for 2 radio stations in Los Angeles in 2004 through 2011. And one of them was the AM station KNX, which was thought of as like it's pretty right wing now. They've really the new management really fucked it up. But anyway,
they were one of the 2 24-hour news stations in LA when I was there.
And they were great for a long time. But then new management. So the old management that was at the time outgoing, which I didn't know, hired me. So I got hired by these old school, noir, just awesome ancient reporters who were just crusty as fuck. And they were the best. But anyway, KNX had this reputation for being the right winger station, regardless of this, because it was going that way anyway. And the left-wing alternative was a public radio station called KPCC. So after I got myself fired from KNX, which is a very funny story. It's not really. I just told off new management. I did what I always do. I'm just like, I told them their coverage was racist and miserable and bullshit. And then I leaked everything to the union. And then I leaked everything to like the local trades. And then I'm like, fuck you, Matt. And then I got fired. So that was
well, I do that sometimes.
I was quitting. Anyway, but that's a whole other story. I was in the process of quitting. They asked me to stay, and I was like, sure. And then I was just like, fine, I'll just fucking make them fired. I didn't really want to get fired, but I also didn't want to work there anymore. I wanted them to get their shit together, but they never did. So, but then I went to work at KPCC, which was this was in 2009, I think, was when I started working for them, and I got fired after a year trying to organize. And then they finally organized, so, but they, or unionized rather. But I noticed that the working class people, like the actual like straight up full on working class people, were the ones at the station that was supposed to be right wing and not for the working people, because they paid better, because they were union, because, you know, they actually like cared for their employees at that time. Now they don't, and it was remarkable, because I was just like, okay, so this public radio station has an invisible bias that KNX doesn't have, which is that it's the bias of the rich and the influential in Los Angeles.
Which the problem is that's who supports public radio, because the government does not sink the kind of money into it that it deserves. And it has to depend on donations from people who can afford to donate.
I think it was 8% of our funding. But they also, like, at that time, I mean, the reason I wanted to unionize the place is because women were routinely underpaid. The management at that time was abusive. Like, there were all these other things going on, and there were really rich donors. I mean, oh my God, KPCC, we had like Tom Hanks calling in, you know, during fundraisers and shit like that. So they could have afforded it. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't help but notice that, like, the people who were like super, super crazy rich, like who really wanted to be like influential players in Los Angeles and the media and politics, they were at the public radio station, which was supposed to be the place where all the working class, like hippie, bleeding heart people went. I was the only bleeding heart. And I don't know if I could call myself working class. I considered myself creative class, which is a term I learned from a friend of mine that I really like, because it's, you know, it's just such a working class. My job is very much not labor, you know. I mean, I just sit around and type. It doesn't feel right to refer.
Well, so but you do produce value. So that's the thing you have to remember is that what you do produce value. You're definitely a worker.
Well, okay, I'll take that. And
you're also sort of management now and an entrepreneur, and there's all that we won't talk about that.
I mean,
it makes me feel gross.
Creative work is essential to society. People spend a lot more money on blockbuster movies than they do on like almost anything else, and I think that alone should be proof of something. And writers like Kim and Arturo would rather be working for an organization like yours than where you guys all used to work, I'm sure.
The bad place. Yeah.
The bad place. So I just want to say about this story you're telling about the two radio stations. I think that this is one of the ways that the right, you know, conservatives have lured people away traditionally for a long time, and still lure like young people away in particular. How does anyone my age end up conservative? It's because somebody opened a bunch of doors for them in exchange for, you know, a little ideology along the way. If you have one of those sweet jobs that just happens to be owned by a conservative Christian owner that you just happen to meet through a friend that you went to church with, et cetera, then you're going to give into the conservative mindset way easier, because it's a mindset of comfort and fear. And just, you know, be more willing to go along with this. That's like the only way. Those kinds of tricks are about the only way they can even get people my age, because otherwise the working class would be giving up on that shit by now, I feel like.
So let's talk about class in the political parties is so much fun. So you have to understand the Republicans are the party of what Marx would call the petty bourgeois.
So we're Democrats now.
Well, no, I'll get to the Democrats in just a moment. But the Republicans are very much the party of people who really, in the great scheme of things, when you consider how much they owe on their houses and their businesses and how little they actually own of their house and their business after the loan, a lot of petty bourgeois people are really working class. And they're really renting their stuff from the real owners.
Yep.
But people don't think of themselves that way. And the small business owner thinks of themselves as equal to and in the same class of the big corporate guys, and that they just have to do well enough and be successful enough, and that's how they'll be.
And in reality, they're not in the same class as the Dell middle manager.
Well,
and
this is where we get to the Democrats. So the Republicans are the petty bourgeois, people who sympathize with billionaires because they think that they're going to move in that billionaire direction themselves. There are also people who resent the middle class guy at the bank more than they resent their actual boss if they work for someone else. Or they resent the property manager at their trailer park. I'm not trying to be prejudiced. I'm just using that as an example. They resent the property manager at the trailer park more than they resent the guy who actually owns the trailer park, because it's the property manager that they deal with every day. And that's who the Democrats represent, that professional managerial class.
Sorry. Okay. So a friend of mine sent over this like guest pass for something called Masterclass.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of this?
I have. I see commercials for it. It's very much the elite, super bougie. Learn from somebody really successful who may not actually be as talented as you.
Some of it was good. I mean, I've been like binge watching it for days, obviously.
I'm sure some of them are good.
Some of it's good, but yeah, it's exactly like that's what I picture. I just picture like, and did we lose Kennedy? Okay. I see.
He turned off his video, it looks like.
So I was just thinking, like, when I'm railing on just sort of limousine liberal types, because I rail on limousine liberal types a lot. I just assume they're all just kind of like watching these masterclass series. Like that's what I'm picturing.
Well, that's exactly who the target audience is. The target audience for masterclass is somebody who has enough time to be intellectually curious and enough ego to think that if they just listen to a few classes from Steven Spielberg, they'll be able to make a movie like Steven Spielberg.
No problem. I could totally do this if I had the time. Right.
They also think that there's shortcuts because they've been given shortcuts to so many things in life in particular. So that they've been trained to believe that, there's a shortcut to everything. And they don't understand that some things can only be achieved through hundreds or thousands of hours. And making a feature length film, even a low budget one, is kind of one of those things, for the record. But when you listen to this masterclass that's like, in 6 lessons, you'll learn everything you need to know, they think, now I have the shortcut that I've been looking for. And it doesn't matter that they're not going to follow through with it, because they were never going to follow through with it.
Yeah. I mean, I really like, for example, like Annie Leibovitz has a thing on there about her philosophy of her photography, which
she's someone who actually understands what she does and approaches it scientifically. So that sounds like one that would be a really good course. But I mean,
of course, it was more like she was just talking about her theories and how she applies them, and it was really good. Although I didn't come out of it like all of a sudden taking amazing photos. I mean, I just like listened to it and I was like, that's what motivates her. So that was cool. But
but if somebody were actually trying to learn something, I bet they probably learned a little bit more from that than from listening to somebody who just sort of goes through the motions and succeeds anyway. Spielberg. Spielberg.
Woo! Wait a second. I liked the Indiana Jones movies. That was Spielberg.
Well, no, I like the Indiana Jones movies. I'm not saying I don't like a lot of Spielberg stuff, but so Spielberg's most successful stuff is either really cheesy and pulpy or intellectually pretentious to the point where you have to remind yourself, this is a guy who's famous for making E.T. and Indiana Jones.
Oh, yeah. I've seen a couple of those.
Because it's like you watch, I mean, Schindler's List is a good movie. I'm not going to say that it's
3 hours long. It's so depressing.
It is. It is at the same time. It is well made and well written, and they do a fairly decent job.
All I remember
it didn't stop anyone from being Nazis, apparently.
It did not. As a matter
But here's the thing: none of those movies ever do.
I just read this amazing book. Well, the book itself is history. It's so it's not like, it doesn't read like a novel, but it's called Hitler in Los Angeles. I've been talking about it. I've been proselytizing about it. It's wonderful. It's a feel-good story. Actually, it is a feel-good story, kind of. It's about how Nazis wanted to take over Hollywood. This is in the 1930s because they saw the propagandistic value, and so Nazis started, like American Nazis started to infiltrate.
Walt Disney.
Yeah, well, Walt Disney, but then they were like at every level. There were like cutters and script writers and name your lingo, because I don't know.
I mentioned Disney because when William Randolph Hearst was trying to blackmail the heads of all the major studios to prevent Citizen Kane from being released in theaters or filmed, he was threatening to publish all their secrets. And one of the secrets that he was threatening to publish was all the gory details of Walt's involvement with and donations to the original America First movement.
But I thought we all knew that.
We all know that
we know it now.
They didn't know that then.
Oh, no shit. I really thought that was something that everybody knew all along, and just it was one of those things where everybody's like, well,
no, but that's the thing. You have to remember that in the days before TV and the internet, people got their news from either newspapers, which in those days it was all from, if you were lucky, you had a good paper. If you weren't lucky, you had a Hearst paper.
Yeah.
And so there was that sort of approach to it.
Well, there's also
they got their news from very highly nudged studio newsreels that were essentially U.S. government propaganda.
Yep.
Oh shit! I got distracted by my face again. I hate looking at my face. I'm always like a primate. Once again, I'm sorry. So Walt Disney, I thought that was just a huge open secret, but
it is now.
Well, now it's not a secret anymore, and I'm glad. But yeah, I just thought that it was one of those things where everybody just pretended it wasn't the case because nobody wanted to hurt that poor man's feelings. Kind of like the last 4 or 5 years where nobody wanted to call, straight up fucking white supremacists the white supremacists they were. It has been a very weird time. But
let's be really honest about something. Our grandparents and great grandparents did not know shit. Just about politics in particular, or things that we would just instantly know now because of Twitter. There was just none of that.
Isn't it great?
It is great, but there was truly no equivalent for it. And when you talk about just or interact with older generations and stuff, you can just really see how much this has affected them, and how some people have been able to sort of cope with the idea that, okay, we have more information now. It's a little tough to grapple with what all of it means sometimes, but it's out there and we should be happy for it. But other people can't even handle the fact that this information exists and are just largely shutting it out. And that's how you get climate change denial, anti-vaxxers, all kinds of things.
Well, that and the people encouraging them for their own fucking aims. But yeah. Oh, but Hitler in Los Angeles. Sorry, I gotta get this out because it's so good. There were they wanted their hands, all these Nazis. So they wanted to build a bunker. They wanted Los Angeles to be the place where there was the official, like Hitler's official, bunker on the West Coast, because it was thought to be, a proper distance between the United States, like it's a triangle between the United States and Germany and Japan, apparently. And they did all this crazy shit. And they were like, they just like tainted all these movie houses. And so they had to go around and I don't know. I don't think anybody ever did get rid of all the Nazis, but I think that presaged a lot of like really aggressively Jewish movies, because they were just like, oh my God, we gotta get these fucking Nazis out.
Not only did they not ever get rid of them, but you have to figure that when the blacklist came around, that was actually a big bonus for the Nazis in the film business.
Oh my God. The book talks about this. I'm so excited. So the House
Un-American Activities Commission.
Un-American Activities, that was it. So that was originally formed at the request of a Jewish guy in Los Angeles named Leon Lewis. And Leon Lewis was the one who was monitoring all the Nazi activity. And so it was supposed to go and like root out Nazi activity, but nobody took him seriously. Oh, by the way, I had like 3 cups of coffee today. And I usually only have one, but I just like had a late night, early morning, and now I'm like, ooh. So he pressured the government eventually over years to form the House Un-American Activities Committee to root out the Nazis. And then in 1950, McCarthy turned it around and, as you said, started to use it to investigate suspected Jews. I mean, communists, of course. Oh, by the way, Kennedy, my backstory that Chris has heard a billion times, that I sometimes talk about on Twitter, is that my family hid from me that we were Jewish. And I only found out about 4 years ago. I grew up with surrounded by fucking Nazis. I also my family looks like me. Like we all look similar, except they all have blue eyes or green eyes and blonde hair. So I came out like this. And so they didn't understand.
You ruined our cover, Brooke.
I know, they're all stealth Jewish people. But I know I totally fucked it up, but they didn't know either, right? But it was no big deal to them, because they're like, oh yeah, cool, we're Jewish. And I was like, no, this is profound. Like if I had known this in high school, I could have I don't know, I could have had a group or something. I wouldn't have had to suffer through this Nazi bullshit alone. And I didn't know how to talk to people about it, instead of just quietly writing down names on lists and shit for 30 years until it became horribly relevant again. And the good thing is, though, I used it to run a bunch of Nazis out of my hometown last year. So that was awesome.
Good.
But the thing is, though, all the shit with the Nazi stuff in the 30s and the 40s that the Jewish people in LA and San Diego and Orange County were fighting over, all of that stuff has been completely recognizably replicated now. The discourse, the discussions about the discourse, the propaganda, the disinformation, all of it. And nobody's taking the fucking people seriously. The only reason they started taking Jewish people seriously, because they were like, oh, well, Jewish people always think Nazis are everywhere. That was the prevailing attitude of the day. Just like now.
I still had somebody say to me just a few days ago, post-Trump, post-storming the Capitol, well, there aren't that many Nazis in America, dude.
Oh, the denial is just...
The Nazi problem isn't real, dude.
Oh, you're just overexcited. Brooke, you're hysterical. Brooke, do you think you might be mentally ill? This is actually the shit people have said to me. I think you might be bipolar and delusional, because you think they are out to get you. And I'm like, yeah, they all are out to fucking get me.
that was literally me a few years ago, before I started doing political podcasting. And I would just be angrily posting on Facebook to people who didn't care, and they'd be like, Kennedy, your mental health is wrong. And I'd be like, because I'm upset that people are being killed by police. And I'm not just bringing this up because it's relevant now. I want it to be clear. I've talked about this on Not Safe for Wonks a lot. This was one of the original issues that radicalized me. So this was what I was posting about it years and years ago, and people are going, Kennedy, I really think you need to get off the internet. Your mental health can't be good. And I'm like, I think my mental health is okay. I spend most of my day in the sunshine, and especially at that time, I loved my job, and I was farming and just having a good time. And I was like, no, my whole day is full of beauty and flowers and animals and sunshine. My life is fine, but then I take a break and I check the news, and the world is bad, and that's why I'm posting this stuff.
Yeah. Like,
and
it's perfectly rational to be upset that the world is shit.
Well, and it's really, really, they're really invested in hiding from people just how shit it is. It's like I used to listen. I don't anymore. I've left that level of discourse behind. Fortunately, I used to listen to the Ezra Klein show.
Oh, I've never listened, so I don't know.
Well, so
don't start now.
Ezra Klein. Ezra Klein has this idea that somehow if we just talk to conservatives without judging them, we'll understand them and we'll be able to, sort of the ultimate bad liberal take about conservatives, which is the one they always have.
No, it's okay. Yeah, it's time now. I think, speaking as a member of I don't even know what the fuck I am. I saw that political, like, what's a meme that sums up your politics on Twitter going around, and the only one I could find that really like adequately summed it up was like a meme from The Expanse, which is like my favorite show and series. Oh God, I gotta talk about The Expanse. Remind me. Where you, like the belt. I don't know if you've watched it, but there's this. It's about class and kind of about racism, but everybody is prejudiced against by their like how they respond to gravity.
It's more about queerness than race.
Yeah, I guess. But well, I mean, I could. That's a good argument. I mean, I could see that, but because the gravitational stuff is something that like. Oh no, I guess so. I was gonna say it's not something that's chosen. It's something that like. It's something that happens like from outside is an extrinsic thing, the gravitational shit. But I guess so, because they don't choose it. It happens. It's part of their identity, whether they like it or not. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I saw it.
Well, that can be
about the border.
And there's like a whole thing about chosen family that's like core to it. And that's there's a whole, you can't really talk about chosen family without bringing up queer folks, in my opinion. Let's just say that much.
No, that's a really good point. And I forget like how important and intrinsic queer history has been to the United States, particularly since the 90s. I was it's easy to forget in San Diego. I was in the 90s, and it was like, it wasn't like now. It wasn't like actively horribly dangerous to go out and protest. It was more fun in the 90s. Mm-hmm. So I was, and I'm saying that because it sounds like way better than it actually was. But I used to go protest for what we called at that time LGBT rights, because it was the 90s. Now it's LGBTQ, and I don't know if anybody even uses that anymore. It makes me feel old to talk about this. But I would go out and demonstrate, march, protest at Pride, and because it became, I think I showed up, it should have been like 1992, 1993, and it was, the issue was more or less settled, but I thought, I was like a teenager, so I thought I was like really like fighting, for important.
Well, it turned out it wasn't that settled, if it helped.
Oh yeah. Here in San Diego, it kind of got not settled, but here in San Diego, it's become just a non-issue for the most part, because there's so many people who are in office who are queer in one way or another, and it's really kind of cool. It's like
it's become less of an issue because the conservatives realized that, like any other identity, it takes second place to wanting to save money on your taxes when you're rich.
Although, I mean, right now, some conservatives aren't able to overlook that. Look at North Carolina or Arkansas.
Well, no, and that's true too. Well, but keep in mind, though, is that, and I'm going to go back to Greenwald here.
Oh, wait, shit.
There is a certain kind.
Oh, fuck, I'm all over the place. Yes.
There is a certain kind of white presenting gay man who has never been terribly tolerant of the transgendered in the first place.
Oh yeah, and there is also a faction of the lesbian community that has gone full turf, and it's
and Glenn Greenwald was defending them and representing them and putting them on his pedestal the last time I was mad at him. So it's just he's managed to do this twice now.
Oh my God.
Let's just say this too. I'll speak on behalf of the queer community for a second. Those lesbians have always existed. We used to call them gold star lesbians back in the day,
They ran me
and
straight out of the scene, as a matter of fact.
that's what they used to do. Is they used to make scenes exclusionary and run people out of them. They weren't always liked back then. And you couldn't call them out at the time because they hadn't done anything so objectionable. And if they just, well, we don't want to be around men. Well, to be honest, I don't like cis men that much. Okay, I kind of forgive you. So etc. But now they've kind of showed their hand that I think most queer people always knew that they had, because if you'd interacted with these types, you kind of knew what they were about.
They were
and it
mean.
wasn't pleasant. Yes, they're mean.
They said I was too femme to be interested in women at all, and then I was just going to go back to men, and that bi didn't exist, and that it was a myth, and the usual shit.
Mhm.
But I did go back to men. I ended up with a man. So, I mean, they were right about that, but like, what the fuck? Maybe I wouldn't have, right? Like, I don't know. I'll never know, because the scene was just not there in the 90s. And then by the time I aged out of like trying to find my identity and became comfortable with it, the way it was, as opposed to like searching, you run out of energy to search after a while. I was like, fuck. But I was always, very like open about my sexuality and my, like, I was very, but being bi in the 90s, being femme and bi in the 90s, which I was, being femme, bi, and into femme women just wasn't done. So yeah, that was it. I mean, it seems so much better now.
I just want to say, I knew you were bi from like 5 minutes into this interview, because you can't sit.
Yeah, but I don't even know if you can claim that anymore, right? I mean, I don't know. I've been out of the scene.
No, but you should. Okay, let's talk about that for a second, because that's a product of that old shitty toxic scene. Your identity is valid even if you're not, quote unquote, living it in an obvious way. You can accept the fact that you have straight passing privilege in some instances, and that you're still not straight, and that still counts for something too. Like, and the older scene didn't allow for that sort of thinking at all. Which
it feels like appropriation on my part, so that I just stay quiet about it, like in most situations, because it feels like there's no struggle for me. There's no, I have no like, I have no hardship in my life, because of my sexuality at all. And the only thing I did have was a bunch of mean, angry people who were scared.
Well, so in theory, you're what everybody was fighting for.
In theory. In reality, though,
to be able to go through your life and have that not be a struggle. I mean, that's in theory what everybody was fighting for.
Yeah. And so, yeah. I mean, and again, here in San Diego, they really did, like the marches and the protests and the demonstrations and the outreach. It worked. It really like they did good. And also Pride got real corporate, but yeah, that shit. Why did I get on this topic? But yeah, and by the way, I totally like joined my local community college, which I was going to at the time, the LGB, because it was LGB, the LGB group, for the same reason everybody else does, to pick up girls or guys, or non-binary people. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. I see the young people, like the Gen Z and whatever is coming after Gen Z, the Gen AA. And they are like, I mean, I don't know that many. I don't really hang out with anybody because I've been locked down for a year, and but like I talk to them online, and I hear what they have to say, and my friends have kids who are Gen Z, which freaks me out, and some have siblings who are Gen Z, which also freaks me out. And they're so accepting. They're very like pro personal identity, but not in an asshole way. They're very pro acceptance in so many ways. They're anti-racist, and it's so great. Like they're doing it right. Like I know there's always things to criticize about every generation. I'm Gen X, so like fuck.
A lost cause.
Yeah.
I was never Alex, despite being Gen X. I was never Alex P. Keaton. I just have to say that on record.
He was a young Republican. No Gen Xer wanted to be a young Republican. Those were all boomers. They were young boomers. But yeah, like it just, I just love it. I mean, I see what the young people are saying, and I'm just like, fuck, the kids are all right. Like, I'm not trying to put pressure on Gen Z to save the world or anything like that. I'm just like, God, I wish I had been as engaged as you are at your age.
Well, see, and that's really the trouble, is that the people who have power now are doing everything they can to keep those kids out of power unless they can co-opt them first.
Yep, that's what they did to us, and they did it successfully. Yep. I mean, Gen X. I'm sorry, Kennedy. I don't know how old you are, and I'm really bad at guessing age, so
I'm in between everything. I'm a millennial.
Oh, millennials are being brothers and sisters, and everybody shout at millennials too. They still shit on millennials. They just leave us out, which is fine. I mean, we're Gen X, right? But yeah, sorry about everything.
Yeah, I'm from the lazy generation that ruined every industry.
Well, people like, well, that's the thing. You get people like Biden who talk like millennials are still kids.
It drives me crazy.
Millennials are all in their 30s now.
I'm 31. I look good, but I'm old.
I turned 44 in April. I'm old.
I'm turning 44 in May. You've got 1 month on me. It's freaking me out. It's so weird. Like, what the fuck? How did this happen?
When in May?
May 27th.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I have to tell you how this works, because you just fit into the pattern. The only person in my immediate circle of immediate family who's outside of this pattern is my mother, whose birthday is in August. My father's birthday is March 1st. My brother's birthday is March 26th. My birthday is April 5th. My sister's birthday is April 23rd. My wife's birthday is May 26th.
Oh! So everybody in your life has birthday
except my mother, who is in August.
You should be really goddamn happy about that, because I have a huge fucking family and they're all local, like huge. Okay, there's the Italians, and then there's the goddamn Bolivians, and then there's the goddamn Mexicans, and then there's the goddamn Polacks. They are all, well, not to overgeneralize, but many of them come from a Catholic background. So I've got a lot of fucking cousins. And they all have their birthdays in December, which means Valentine's Day sex, which I don't even want to think about. It's so gross. But yeah, they're all clustered. It's November and June. So there's like the November parties and the June parties.
Yeah, I hate to say this, but when it's every 10 months like that, you know that there's some sort of religion that doesn't believe in birthdays.
Then off to the corner are the rest of us who are like, yeah, we're Jews or whatever the fuck we are. You know? California nothings who have a secret cultural identity that they only unearthed 4 years ago. There, like that. Sorry I keep talking about it. It's just something that like I'm learning, and it's a big deal to me because I just never had any kind of ethnic or cultural identity at all.
Plus, you hate Nazis, and now you know why.
You what?
Now you know why you hate Nazis so much.
Oh yeah, no, but that's just being a decent person.
That's true too.
No, but also I think it's important to recognize that if you have Jewish heritage, and I have some Jewish heritage, and it's been something that I've thought about off and on in different ways throughout my life, and had different kinds of experiences with, positive and negative, etc. I think it's worth knowing. Like there's a journey that goes on, because there's a generational trauma aspect that you can't always explain until you realize this. And I've had this moment with a few friends where they kind of realize that this is like a possible explanation for some of the weird generational shit going on. I know that in my case, that my grandpa on my dad's side was partially driven out of his right mind by his inability to cope with a fusion of heritages that didn't make sense to him. And that was sort of like being ridiculed in different directions and things. And especially because there's a little bit of like Arabic Jewish, the not so acceptable kind of Jewish heritage on that side. And so, but he also had some German heritage. And I remember growing up thinking about, did I have ancestors that like killed each other in World War II? It's possible. I definitely have ancestors that killed each other in the Civil War, but that's a whole nother story.
Well, Anybody of mostly European descent has ancestors that killed each other. Because the one thing that Europeans have done most successfully
is just
over the years, kill each other in the rest of the world.
This is why I used to laugh so hard when I used to know like a cadre of people who just loved Europe and like all things Europe as this like, you know, cultural paradise. And I'm like, like I know the history, and also I've spent significant amounts of time in various parts of Western Europe and England. Like my family lived there between there. And you know, when you're in England, you might as well just go to Europe because it's right there. And yeah, those guys invented colonialism, like
and also uninvented bathing. I'll bring that up any chance I get.
What is that? Now I'm self-conscious about not being able to sit still, by the way. That was silly.
Though it's, you know, it's not as obvious the way I have my setup, but my legs are just like woo all the time down here.
No, same thing with my legs. So
that's very funny. Well, I'm going to use that from now on. If I ever get out into the public again after my shots, maybe.
Oh no, that's something I can always joke endlessly about. One of my co-hosts of my other show, Rachel, and I will make lots of jokes about how bisexual flirting is just sending each other pictures of yourself sitting wrong. You know, look at how wrong I'm sitting right now. Ooh, damn, you're really not in that chair at all. Wow.
Well. There is a certain element of sitting wrong that goes all the way that goes back a long way in heterosexual flirting too.
That's not flirting. That's annoying me on a bus. Maybe they think it's flirting.
Yeah, that's not I want to be clear. That's not heterosexual flirting, Chris.
That's just being weird.
I'm not going to get too into it tonight because that's a whole thing. But some of that hyper masculine stuff, it's advertising to a different group. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, look at that.
There used to be this. So I have like a big thing for. I'm like really sweet on bears because I used to like hang out with a bunch of them, and they were just cool, and I like bears. I like their whole attitude, their aesthetic, everything. And it was during my formative years, so I think that like it just, but that hyper masculine, well, not hyper masculine, it's more like hyper masculine, hairy, but like non-threatening. That was the vibe that I always picked up on. So it was sort of like they're just big, beefy, hairy dudes who just want to hang out and have a good time. Like that's my very educated opinion on bears because that was how they presented to me. So yeah, that's like that group. Every time I see somebody who looks like that, I'm like. Unfortunately, a lot of the Nazis are starting to adopt the bear look now, which is very disappointing. Makes things very confusing. I know.
Fuck Nazis.
They fucking ruin everything.
They do. Nazis ruin everything.
My favorite lesbian haircut, for the record, because it used to look so cute. Oh,
yes.
You know that look? Oh well. I shouldn't say lesbian haircut, but you know what I'm talking about, right? That like whole.
You know what you mean.
I've said some shit to people who don't know my history, like who don't know that like I actually have, you know, a life or used to have a life that was in spaces that I learned lingo from. And so at one point I used well, I'm not going to use it now because now it's like straight up offensive. But at that time it was like not, but the D word rhymes with Mike.
Oh, yeah, we knew what you meant.
Oh. Well, you looked at me and I was like, so I said that because I had learned it about, you know, to use it as like a descriptor of myself and other people. Like it was just sort of like a jokey like thing, right? And I learned real fast that became a slur. So now I'm like, oh God, what else am I saying? Like what other fucked up old person shit?
Well, that's one of those. That's a code switching word that's always a slur if you're not part of the club.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm part of it enough to use it, so I'm just never gonna use it.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know if I feel good about using it anyway, even if I was, because I don't like using the reappropriation thing. I like the idea, but in practice, it always makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. You know,
it's almost a historical word. I'm not sure if anyone's in that club anymore. Hardly, you know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure
really?
that there are some people that I'm sure really claim it. I'm not trying to tell them to stop. You know, if that's how you feel, and that's your scene and whatever, and good, great, I don't care. But it is kind of like it is a little bit of anachronistic, I think, feeling.
Yeah, that's how I thought of it. I always thought it was like
there's still plenty of people who use it within the scene. I mean, but you've got to be within the scene.
Yeah.
And I am so far out of every fucking scene anywhere. I'm too old for any. I'm just too old for scenes, right? Like I just.
What's disturbing is I'm right about the right age to re-enter some of the scenes that I was in as a kid, because because there are certain subcultures where middle-aged men do better than young men.
You've got to expand more on this. I don't understand it at all.
I'm trying not to share too much, actually.
Is it gaming? Because if it's gaming, I'm into it.
It's not gaming.
Oh, okay.
Playing is involved.
Damn it.
Oh god, the mind just.
I'm losing my thought. Fuck.
I also had all that marijuana tea. So it's just rambling.
But okay,
No.
But part of the reason, part of the reason I was saying that was anachronistic, though, is because you're saying, like, yeah, if you're in a scene, then yes, you would use that term. But what's interesting about that is that most young, like, Zoomers don't really have scenes. They just have dating, and dating happens to include queer people, and there aren't, like,
Chris,
you don't really go in the past, you really had to, like, go to specific places and groups to find the queer folks to date, of your particular preference or whatever. And, like, that's just not really, I can't say I've spoken to one Zoomer that has had that experience. You ask these Zoomers how they met their partners, and none of them have those stories anymore. So that's really what I mean about it being kind of anachronistic, is that there's this whole specific.
And that's exactly what those mean old ladies Glenn Greenwald likes were complaining about when he lifted them up, that scene doesn't exist anymore because everything's essentially been normalized.
So they can't be gatekeepers anymore.
But rather than blaming it on the normalization of their subculture, the person in question was choosing to blame it on, well, all the femme girls want to be bisexual and marry men, and all the girls who would join us are getting surgery to turn into men. And now the only people who are calling themselves lesbians used to be men. And it was all very, very petty and angry.
Is that what the argument was? I was nodding because I've heard that the second argument.
That was exactly what the argument was.
Jesus fuck.
That basically lesbians were being destroyed by an industry designed to turn them into transgender men. Combined with lesbian culture being taken over by men in the form of trans women.
There's just so much to unpack there.
Yes, there is.
It's an endless amount. Let me let everybody in on a little secret too. This is something. This might be a little controversial in some ways to some people, but I'm just gonna say it anyway. And if some people want to get upset with me, get upset with me. If you spent time with lesbian farmer culture in the South, and I've spent decades around it, when you get to know these couples, they initially introduce themselves as a lesbian couple of women. Mm-hmm. But if you get to know them well, they use masculine words for one of their partners or both of their partners sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. And we'll say, this is my man, as the person, I'm just going to use they, gets off the tractor, as they get off the tractor or whatever, this is my man, look at my man, so strong, stuff like that. But you don't see this unless these people are comfortable enough around you to show you that side of how they behave. So I'm just going to say for the record that outside of this exclusionary, perfect gold star lesbian world, there has always been a gender fluid world of lesbianism that is not as well understood and is not as much discussed and is very poorly documented. But to pretend like these people are just emerging from nowhere is absurd when you can go to the rural South and find these people that I'm talking about, and they're still out there. They're older now, but they're still there.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. Like, why are we denying this whole, continuum of human sexual behavior? Like, what the fuck, man? This is what people do. This is what humans have always done. This is natural. Like, people just do different things sexually. Some people are poly. Some people want to be alone. Some people want to couple up. Like, some people want to do things one way. Something like I really am really fucking tired of it being this, cultural flashpoint. And I mean, I know it's just, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's just like, I really wish that, bad people like policymakers and influential people wouldn't keep seizing on this as a way to divide people. It's hurting people. It's killing people. It's destroying lives. Their shitty rhetoric. And for what, right? I mean, it's just this convenient political football. What is stopping people from expressing who they are as individuals? What does that, or rather, what does allow?
So
in a dignified
what
way.
it comes down to is power.
Well, yeah, but like the world doesn't gain. They enrich their coffers. Sure, they become more powerful. But like, who gives a shit about fucking power either?
But anyway. That's the thing is that there are people who care a lot about this.
Yeah, I know. I don't care money that much either.
This whole Nazi thing. This whole Nazi thing is the best person to explain it is Herman Wouk in The Winds of War, where he explains how culturally messed up the Germans are, and how having Hegel and Nietzsche and Martin Luther and all these other big cultural influences pushing in all these different directions have created this schizophrenic German culture that is waiting to go crazy. But that's very much the way that it was in the 1930s. You had all these different cultural inputs that went from the extremely tolerant and cosmopolitan. Remember that while Wilhelm II was kind of anti-Semitic, William II's father was the Kaiser who made Jews, who passed the citizenship laws that made all Jews German citizens. And he brought Jews into the government. And he said, all Jews who want to be German first are German first. And it was this big cosmopolitan love fest for a little while. But there was also the whole time this seething anti-Semitic, violently Lutheran and violently Calvinist, very religious subculture in Germany too. And all these influences sort of boiled up during the Weimar Republic and expressed themselves in the various sides of the political disputes leading up to Hitler taking power. But Hitler was a very normal result of the weird cultural inputs. And remember, we live in a quote unquote melting pot.
Yeah.
Which at the same time is always trying to impose on itself this very Puritan set of WASP values. Right. And who were the Puritans? The Puritans were Calvinists, just like the Nazis.
All right.
Interesting.
I was wondering where you're going with that. I knew it was going to be somewhere disturbing,
and Calvinism. I mean, Calvinism is where so many of these parochial and not good ideas,
austerity, self-loathing,
yes, the idea that nobody should ever have any fun, that people should live to work.
Your value is your work.
Good people by their heart, because they're hardworking and successful. The prosperity gospel garbage that they jip people with now comes straight from the the Calvinist idea of how you recognize the elect, because God will bless them in this world too.
The absolutist ideas about mental health that a lot of people in this country have come from Calvinism.
Well, I think a lot of that, I think some of that, I shouldn't say a lot, because I think about this a lot. My theory, I should say, because I don't want to sound like I'm more knowledgeable about a topic than I actually am. I am of the opinion that I think at least some of that, like the shittiness about mental health around mental health in this country, is because people don't have access to it, and so they can't. It's like, well, fuck, I didn't want that anyway. Who needs it? I don't need it. I'm fine.
Well, that's part of it. But there's also remember, we live in a society where everybody is dealing with multiple mental health issues because of the way that capitalism repeatedly traumatizes people.
Oh, I lived in Alaska for a couple of years. I went in for SAD light, a seasonal affective disorder light. So I found a psychiatrist, because I thought you had to go to a psychiatrist to get a SAD light prescribed. She denied me the SAD light. She's like, "You're obviously bipolar." And I said, how is it obvious that I'm bipolar? This is 2000, I think. Maybe 2001. It was 2001. It was right after fucking 9/11. So of course I was miserable and depressed, living in Alaska, fucking winter time in Alaska, where I'm from California. There's no sun. 9/11, going through a terrible breakup. So anyway, I go in, try to get a SAD light. She's like, "No, you're bipolar." And I'm like, "Well, how would you know if I'm bipolar?" And she said, "Well, sometimes are you very happy and other times very sad?" And I said, "Well, who isn't?" And she's like, "That's bipolar." And I said, "Well, no." Anyway, upshot was she wouldn't shut up about how I was bipolar. She really wanted to put me on these medications. So she put me on 2 medications. One was Depakote, and the other one was something I can't remember. It was like an anti.
Depakote is probably Depakote and Risperdal. That was the combination that was really big back then. In the 90s, when I was having homesickness issues for the little while that I was in school in Kansas, I went to somebody for depression. I went to a doctor for depression there, and Depakote and Risperdal was what they gave me.
I think it may have been Risperdal. One was an anticonvulsant. I remember that. And I took it once.
Depakote is an anticonvulsant that also works as an antidepressant.
Okay.
Risperdal is an antipsychotic that they give to people along with antidepressants in order to help them focus better, because of some of the side effects of antidepressants where you just get kind of
Jesus fucking Christ. Well, I took one of each. That was all I could handle. It had very bad side effects for me, very bad. So I called her and I was like, "I'm having really bad, like repetitive suicidal thoughts that I'm not like that. I'm not that kind of person. It started, a couple hours after taking this. So what do I do? Because I don't want to drive off a bridge, but I am having like repetitive thoughts telling me that I should drive off a bridge." And she's like, "Drink a lot of water." I'm like, "Oh, thanks a fucking lot, lady." Anyway, I never went back.
Wise decision.
It was like that. And I got misdiagnosed with a lot of things because I was depressed. I did have issues. I was very sensitive to lack of sunlight, for one thing. But another thing was that I was depressed. I mean, fuck, it was 2001, right? And plus I've always had depression issues throughout my life, on and off. Anxiety, depression, I'm hypervigilant. And fine, right? That's who I am, like whatever. And a lot of it is.
You grew up surrounded by Nazis. That would make anybody hypervigilant.
Surrounded by Nazis, and I'm a fucking reporter who deliberately went out of her way for whatever reason, and unpack whatever you want. But I pushed myself to go to like the worst places, or not the worst places, but the most unstable. Like whenever there was some instability close to me, I'd be like, "Gotta go." So I would put myself into like these highly unstable situations where things were deteriorating, and then I would come out of there like, "Why do I keep having these repetitive nightmares?" So I got misdiagnosed with all kinds of shit, and they kept trying to give me medications. Where when I would say I don't want medications, I want to know what my issue is, so so I can do something about these intrusive thoughts, this insomnia, the nightmares, like all these things. And they would keep there was this just very much pressure to medicate. It was, but it wasn't like we've seen you for 6 months, and we've looked at your symptoms, and here's what we think. It was always like I would walk in 20 minutes later, be like, "Here's your meds." I did not feel heard at all. So I finally found a talk therapist who was just talk only. and talked to her for about 6 months. And I said, finally, do I have any kind of diagnosis? Like, do you know what's been, why I've been so tense and nightmares, depressed, stressed out? I mean, by then it had been going on for like 7 or 8 years. And she said, yeah, you have post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'm like, no shit, that's PTSD. And she's like, well, okay, there's this and there's and this. And she starts detailing all this stuff. And I'm like, I guess that does sound like me, like the intrusive. But that just like, it took me 8 years to get that diagnosis. And by the way, I got treated with talk therapy, and I started like everything started to sort of like smooth out. Like I'm not ever going to be, totally well adjusted and not have nightmares and shit, but at least I know now how to handle stress. And like, if I start getting depressed, I know, like, I start like going for long walks, do yoga and all that shit.
Well, adjusted people are boring anyway.
Yes, they are. They're no fun. And so there was that end of it, the part where it was really difficult to get proper treatment, to get anybody to actually hear you. And then there was that fucking stigma that finally is now beginning to break because of the internet. Really, like, people are actually talking about this. When we were in our teens and 20s, we being Gen X, sorry, I'm like pointing at Chris that you can't tell, but I am. It was just like, oh, he's crazy, she's crazy, that was it. Oh, they're crazy, they lost their shit, they're done, like or like, men would say to me, because I guess I come off as intense, like I'd be dating, and these like dudes would say, these shitty dudes, because by then dudes, because all the, I'd moved to a different city, I was like completely run out, but anyway, and they'd be like, you're not gonna go psycho on me, are you? And I'd be like, what the fuck does that mean? Well, first of all, are you asking me if I'm going to show up at your door because I don't have the time? Like, fuck you. Also, that's really insulting. But that psycho, like, she's psycho, was a big thing that men would throw, shitty men would throw at women. And they would do it preemptively. I mean, they may have done it to men as well. I don't know, but it always seemed like a very gendered thing. And they would do it preemptively to discredit any, abuse.
Well, you deliberately stigmatize your target as the crazy chick, so that when you start to groom and abuse them, that everybody will just think they're the crazy chick and not listen to them.
I told you she was crazy. Yeah. And by the way, the dudes who hit me with that line 100% of the time, because I would be like, okay, like, I'm not going to fucking psycho. And I was young back then and insecure, so I would continue dating them despite this obvious red flag. And I would do my thing, and I would work, because I was always very ambitious. Well, not ambitious, but like work focused, because I was trying to save the world and all that shit. And I'd have my routine. Like, I like spending a lot of time by myself, so I would spend a lot of time, all that shit. And 100% of the time, those same dudes were the ones who would show up at my fucking door in the middle of the night. So there you go. It was always projection.
Well, it always is.
Always. But
most of the things, and I don't care what sort of secrets I'm giving out, because I have no real loyalty to other cis straight men. But I mean, most of the things that men bitch about women are things that men do all the time. Men bitch about women being late. Men do what they want when they want to do it. I mean, if they have to go to work, they go to work when they're supposed to. But after they get off the clock, they come home whenever they want. The things that make men mad are when women act like men, and when women treat men the way men treat women.
One time I got into a fist fight with this dude. Sorry. So when I was younger, I was always getting into fist fights and shit. I'm very short, and I'm mad about it. So I'm always like,
we've got to meet in person just to see if you still like me when you see how tall I am.
Oh yeah, no, I got nothing against tall people. In fact, I've got tall people in my family. Everybody in my family is taller than I am. I'm 5'3". So my brother is fucking 6'7". My sister is like 5'9" or 5'10". She's, and my mom's like, I guess the nutrition just wasn't as good in the 70s as it was in the 80s. I think she's fucking with me though. Okay, what was I talking about?
I think so too, because I'm the tallest one, and I'm the oldest and the tallest. So
see, maybe she smoked. I don't know. Well, actually, I don't. I know that I was conceived with marijuana, but I don't know if she smoked during pregnancy. I'll have to ask her. You know what? No, I won't, because I don't want to know the answer. So
You don't want to know.
So this dude, okay. I lived in Atlanta for a while, and I was of all places, I was at the OBGYN. I'm sorry, I'm telling you that detail. It's really not germane to the story, but that was why I came out of the OBGYNs in a very pissed off mood, because it is never pleasant. It's just, it's invasive and intrusive and humiliating and just not a whole lot of fun, no matter how nice they are or whatever. It's just always like, oh, I come out of there like, I got beat up in stirrups.
I have to have prostate exams now. I know what you mean.
Yeah. Similar mechanism, yes. So I come out and there's a goddamn boot on my car, even though I'd paid for parking. And I was like, and the guy was still putting boots in the car. So I was like, hey man, I'm here. Can I just give you the money or something? Or like put $5 more in or something, get the boot off so I can go? He's like, nope, gotta pay. And I'm like, okay, well, can I give you the money, I guess? I mean, it's like $75 and I can't really afford it, but like, I can give you the money right now. He's like, no, you have to mail it in. So you'll be able to pick it up from the like towing yard. It was just bullshit. And I was like, I'm 5 minutes late coming out because I was at the fucking doctor's office. I mean, I couldn't exactly jump off the table and run out. And plus I'm in a parking lot. I paid. It was like 5 minutes. And he's like, too bad, so sad. And I'm like, just, can you please just take, and I had to get to work. I was frantic. I only had the car. And then I lost my temper. And he's like, no. And you could tell, or I could tell he was enjoying it. He's like smirking at me and just being a fucking dick. And so I'm like handing my card to him. I'm like, can you please just take my money and just run my card, take the fucking $75, take the boot off. And he's like, nope. And finally I said, just take my fucking card, take my fucking money. He's like, oh, you like that? Are you a man? I'll treat you like a man. So he fucking did that gender role shit on me. He's like, you talk like a man, you get owned like a man. And he came over and he punched me. And I went flying because he shoved me at the same time. And remember, I'm 5'3", about 120 pounds. So I just went in the middle of the day. And so I got up and I was like, oh, it's on now, you motherfucker. So I was like sliding out this fucker in the parking lot, just like.
And here I thought I wasn't going to be able to give Kennedy any old-fashioned reporter drinking and brawling story.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is not coming out of light. I'm really sorry, but it's, But I was just so pissed. I'm like, I'm coming out of the OB/GYN. Like, it was just so fucking gendered. Like, it was so, I just felt so trapped in my womanhood. And this guy was just doing this shit because he could. So they're just like, fuck it. So I'm like trying to kick him in the nuts. And it was just bad. So finally he like shoves me until I like fly, several feet away. And then he gets in his car and like speeds away. He's like, you fucking cunt. And like drives off. And then some people come over and they're like, are you okay? We wanted to intervene, but we weren't sure if that was your boyfriend. And I'm like, what is wrong with you people? What's wrong with every single person here? Like, fuck you. And then I'm like, oh, so fuck you. He like chipped my tooth, right? So they like run off, and but at this time I'm so upset by the whole thing. There's still a boot on my car. I'm just like, and like again, my lips chipped. My tooth is chipped. My lip is bleeding. I've been fucking in a fist fight. My elbows are scuffed. I'm just like, somebody's hit me, and I'm just like, ah. And so they bring this crowd that had watched this whole thing go down without intervening. Like, what the fuck? Thanks a lot, guys. Went and found some bicycle cops. So the bicycle cops come over and they're like, what happened? I'm like, I mean, I'm like, I fucking Karen'd out, but I was already crying by the time they brought this, these people over. And they're like, who was it? And I'm like, I don't know, it's a boot guy. And they're like, oh, that guy over there. And they like point over and the guy's like right there glaring. And so they fucking go over and arrest him. And then I'm like, what the fuck just happened? Holy shit. And they're like, do you want to press charges? And I'm like, no, philosophically, no, but rationally, yes. Like, I really want to see his face when he's loaded off and like fucking like, I want you to call his family and humiliate him. I want him to fucking like, but I also don't like, so at some point he goes and like beckons the cops over and whispers something in the cop's ear, and the cop like goes like this and comes to me and goes, hey, he says if you agree not to press charges, he'll take the boot off. And I was like pretending to think about it, because I was like, I wasn't gonna fucking press charges. I didn't want to. As enraging as the whole thing was, I didn't like the whole like crying cops, like the whole thing, because it was so gendered beginning to end. But anyway, he took my boot off. I dropped charges. The end. But yeah, the striking part, other than his fist in my fucking face, was when he was like, "Oh, you're a man. I'm gonna treat you like a man." It was just very gendered and weird and fucking.
Well, it's very it's there's a whole lot of stuff that goes into that kind of thinking that just it's not cool, but it's just it's part of who people are told they're supposed to be too, from
toxic masculinity.
And I'm glad that I'm glad that whatever other problems they had, my family wasn't like that.
Yeah, I mean, same, but I was raised by women mostly, so
I bitch about my family all the time, but I mean, they were pretty cool for being a bunch of weirdos.
Hey, weirdos are the best.
Yeah.
I'm kind of normie weirdos, so that's a little
normie weirdos.
They're weirdos, but they're normies.
Like mayonnaise on their Jello, weird.
Like, not quite like that.
I'm trying to think what normie weird would be. Well, there's things that I think are weird that are apparently totally normal, like I don't know, mayonnaise on Jello.
Sorry, I don't think that's normal.
It's not normal.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people do it though, or maybe it's Miracle Whip. Either
well,
way.
no, I know what you're. Well, there's what they call. You're not supposed to actually eat anything but what's in it, but there's what they call an aspic, which is some chicken salad or tuna salad in a Jello mold.
Oh, I've seen those.
So you'll see mayo on Jello in that context. But you're not actually supposed to eat anything but what's inside the Jello mold. You're not supposed to eat the Jello with it, really.
No, I did not know that. Ugh. God. Anyway, sorry, I went far afield because I'm getting sick.
But hey, no, it makes it far afield makes for a good show sometimes, even if it's not what we were always planning on. I do have to ask, what's everybody thinking about the verdict most likely being for the Chauvin trial?
I don't know. I'm at a loss. I don't know.
I mean,
I'm hoping for guilty, but I'm terrified.
I hate to repeat a theme that the mainstream media talks about, but have you ever seen so many cops testify against a cop before?
Never. I mean, I didn't watch any, but I've just been reading reports because I can't bear to watch it. But never.
Understandable.
Nobody seems to like this guy. Like, people seem to have considered him a gigantic red flag for fucking years. I mean, he's been doing this horrible shit to people for 8 years, right? That we know of.
Well, he killed someone under suspicious circumstances in a shooting, and Amy Klobuchar didn't prosecute him.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Why?
Because she's a white lady prosecutor and he's a cop.
She's a Karen in power.
Well, I mean, let's face it. The only time anybody ever prosecutes a cop is when they have no other choice.
Yeah, it seems like it. Those Palestinians. Oh, I have a conspiracy theory.
Well, actually, let's talk about one other aspect of this, which is that even amongst the police who protect their own to a large extent, gender and race still applies. And if you are not a man or you are not white and you are a cop and you commit an offense, you're a little more likely to be prosecuted or fired.
Well, they did. To be fair, yes, they prosecuted and convicted Amber Geiger, but the cops loved her, but her fellow cops loved her enough that the primary prosecution witness in her trial was murdered after.
Yeah.
So I don't like to say that I don't like to say that they always hang those atypical people out to dry, because the cops cared enough to allegedly, or it looks suspiciously. I don't want to get
in Minecraft.
They cared enough that it really looks like the death of the primary witness against her really looks like a street execution.
Interesting.
It was exactly the sort of street execution you would expect to see from either the mafia or the cops. And the mafia doesn't do much anymore.
Sorry, why did you say the mafia twice just now? Anyway, the Derek Chauvin trial, what do I expect? Well, the Biden team is having a series of long, intensive meetings to prepare for the possible ramifications of the trial. So I don't expect anything good, to be honest.
I know from Ben Theobald, who is a DSA member and radio host in Illinois. I know that J.B. Pritzker has the National Guard on alert in case anything in Chicago happens in sympathy with the Chauvin verdict. So if there's any sort of uprising in Chicago, expect to see the National Guard thrown at the folks protesting really fast.
Fuck. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping to see signs of positive change and growth, as a nation. But I mean, everybody's already acting like the Trump administration never happened. Like all the things that we found out about people, all the things the ugliness that was revealed, all of the horrible.
The Biden administration is trying to. The Biden administration is trying to business as usual everything.
Yeah.
Right down to the point where they're continuing and defending Trump policies.
I know, the fucking asylum seeker policy, the refugee
asylum seeker policy, the fact that they still have
Cuba sanctions.
Oh my God.
Let's talk about that too. Let's not forget that that's something that Obama, as many things as he did wrong, made some strides towards opening up positive relations with Cuba, relations that could have been critically useful during this pandemic. A time when Cuba's excellent healthcare system was kicking ass and ours was falling behind. Yeah, it might have been useful to have a nearby ally with great healthcare helping us during a pandemic. But no, instead, Trump,
Canada didn't come through.
He put more sanctions, more restrictions, etc. on Cuba than ever before, but then in a long time. And what is Biden saying about it? Well, dealing with it's not a priority. This is the stroke of a pen. This is literally just say, okay, we're not going to fuck with Cuba. Here's my signature. I'm Joe Biden. This is as simple as can be. To say that there's no time for it is to suggest that there's something to think about. That it's not a simple decision. And that's how Biden's treating all of this Trump shit.
Biden believes every lie that every conservative in the Democratic Party and every former Republican consultant in the Democratic Party tells him about Cuban Americans.
It's been this way, though. It's like the older Democrats are more willing to work with the very same Republicans who have demonstrated that they are just absolutely terrible people. The Ted Cruz's who will try to sneak out of the state that he purports to represent in the middle of a winter storm, for example. I think that Marjorie Taylor Greene might just be barely too toxic, maybe, but Matt Gaetz wasn't until recently when he started being surrounded by the aroma of.
So I'm going to say something here. I'm not a Gaetz fan. I think he's probably a slimeball. But I don't think Gaetz would have had. I don't think Gaetz would have had legal problems if he hadn't he hadn't sided with Bernie and Roe on a lot of the Yemen and Iran stuff as far as war stuff went. Because Gaetz was like the only Republican in Congress to vote with Ro Khanna and the anti-Yemen Democrats twice. So, I mean, he apparently was good on some of the war stuff, and
I always felt like that was sort of, accidental, and or he was doing it to sort of like slime the vote somehow.
I don't know. He was apparently really good friends with Katie Hill, though. Now that
very odd.
And I don't mean to.
Is it?
It's not that odd anymore.
Oh God, I can't remember. You're gonna have to remind me.
No, so remember, Katie Hill Katie Hill left Congress because of a sex scandal.
I've been like this for several years now. It's getting better, but slowly.
So first, Katie Hill is the only woman I know of to be run out of Congress for a sex scandal.
Oh, right, her. Yes.
So that's number one. Number two,
and it was with somebody.
She's extremely attractive, so I know exactly why Matt Gaetz was friends with her.
But why was she friends with him?
Now that's another question. Apparently, her husband was a scumbag.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry,
let's say this about Katie Hill also, because this is, I think, worth noting. And I want to say, for the record, I was one to say that initially that Katie Hill being run out of Congress was unfair. So I was on her side at one time. Mm-hmm. She's lost my support since then for various reasons, things that I've learned, things that she's done since then, etc. But I just want to say, for the record, I'm not coming here to just bash Katie Hill and give her a weird reputation on no basis. I wanted to defend her, but for the record, she vacated her seat before an investigation could be formally held.
Well,
that's suspicious behavior. Al Franken did the same thing when he left his seat, and it was to prevent the details of his full abuses from coming out. Because what most people know, and sorry, Chris, but I have to shit on Al Franken for a second any chance I can. What most people know about Al Franken and his abuses is surface level stuff that's not as bad as some of the other abuses, because he was incredibly accused by 8+ women, which is something most people forget. So Al Franken resigned knowing that there was about to be a full investigation into all 8 women, etc. When Katie Hill resigned, if she really had nothing to hide, she should have let the investigation. I hate to talk like this because I sound like a fucking conservative. But she should have let the investigation run its course.
I'm going to talk about the ethical part of this, as opposed to the sexual freedom part of this. The reason that Katie Hill and her husband got divorced, in addition to him being the sort of asshole who does the revenge porn thing, which suggests they probably shouldn't have been married in the first place, but the reason that they specifically got divorced is because she had an affair with someone who was on her campaign staff, which is an ethical violation.
Right.
Now, I don't have any problem with people doing whatever fun, cuddly parts they want to do on their own time. But there are ethical questions about who people are in relationships with and why. It's against congressional ethics to have a relationship with someone who works for you as your staff for a variety of perfectly good reasons.
It's worth noting, though, that the specific accusation that primarily kicked this off, now there was also a separate accusation that she may have also been inappropriate with a congressional staffer, but the main accusation that was leveled against her was from during her campaign. Yes. Technically, this is not necessarily an ethics violation, which also, again, kind of begs certain questions about why she wasn't willing to go through with an investigation. Because if it had been, again, a year ago, I gave a whole argument about why she was within her rights to not be prodded about this stuff. But now I kind of want to know.
It really looks like she was like that relationship had continued after he was working in her congressional office, among other things. There was also an accusation that she had flirted with or made an unwanted advance on somebody else's staffer. I remember that.
Was one of your defenses of her, because I was about to say this, and if now I want to know if you said this, and because I'll know you have a rebuttal. Was one of it that it's just like incredibly difficult to be a woman in public, and the smears are just like particularly dreadful, the death threats, the pressure, like maybe she wanted to avoid all that. I mean, I don't know enough about it to have an opinion on it, so I'm just sort of asking you about this in good faith. So
yeah, okay. No, I think she's She's a queer woman who was living a slightly alternative lifestyle behind closed doors, including like sex and drugs and things like that. And I think that people like that receive, an undue amount of scrutiny a lot of the time. I also think that it's unfair. And my big thing is I was like, well, if this is the disqualification for running for office, I'm never running. And I would recommend that virtually no one that I know runs for office,
Yeah.
But, and so I thought that there was that. I also thought that, a lot of this was drug out into the open because of an ex-husband,
It was
being abusive towards her in the public. And
and
that is totally valid. Separated from any other concerns about her character, I just want to say for the record, he's a scumbag.
Yes.
That he is a piece of shit, and that the pressure that he put on her through trying to publicly humiliate her was completely unfair, and that was a big part of why I defended her at the time.
He didn't just put her scandal out there. He deliberately put her scandal out there for the benefit of people who wanted George Stephanopoulos to run for Congress.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Oh, God, it had to be all wound up in a goddamn disinformation campaign with international implications as well. I forgot, because nothing is ever fucking simple anymore. But now I have to ask Kennedy, what changed your mind? Like, what made, or rather not change your mind, but what made you go from that, knowing all that, to, yeah, but at the same time, her behavior just is not cool, because I don't know enough about it. I remember it vaguely. I was in the middle. I was like fully fire hosed, and I can't secretly look it up because my phone's charging in the other room.
I think that she didn't have to become like a huge Me Too advocate per se or something like that, but I sort of expected her, if she had been truly treated a certain way by the political establishment and by her ex-husband and by all these people and all of this stuff, and that had sort of been conspired against, and that if she would behave in a certain way afterwards, I guess would be just a way to put it. That she would promote certain causes or defend certain people or not defend certain people, etc. And instead, it's kind of been the opposite a lot, where she's defended increasingly questionable people, and including some of them people that you're like, why do you still feel you owe allegiance to this person? They're one of the people that effectively ran you out of your job.
Yeah, she's awfully loyal to conservative Democrats who were the people who, because this is the whole thing you have to understand about the Katie Hill mess, is that Katie Hill was probably the most conservative of the progressives elected to Congress in 2018. She was by no means a squad member. She's not even Katie Porter. She's more Lauren Underwood.
Yeah, I kept confusing her, Katie Hill, Katie Porter, and unfortunately, Kristen Sinema.
Yeah, but Katie Hill, but at the same time, Katie Hill, her district decided that she was absolutely unforgivably progressive by their standards, and they decided to run her out for being too left. And since being run out for being too left, her reaction is to be like best friends with all the right wingers who threw her under the bus.
It's so weird, man.
It's so weird. And she goes straight from this scandal to being given a ton of money to start a super PAC and become a huge behind the scenes political influencer of that type. Well, that's kind of weird, isn't it? It really seems like someone took her in a smoky room and said, this is your consolation prize. You can't be in office anymore. You're too hot. But take that however you want. But how do you feel about, this? And who knows that she's not tied into enough people's secrets to be offered something like that. You know what I mean? Some people are run out and they're not given a sweetheart deal. Say what you will about Al Franken. I certainly do. He wasn't really given a sweetheart deal when he was sent packing. by some dark money interest. He was just sort of left alone to rot for the most part. Katie Hill was instantly given control of a massive dark money super PAC and told, go elect who you want.
So the thing to remember is that everything else involved, that and Brooke will know exactly what I'm talking about. There is a certain hot girl lifestyle that is expected of you in Southern California if you're a hot girl.
Well, I appreciate the implied compliment, but I actually don't know what you're talking about. I'm a gamer, dude. I'm a gamer. Like what I used to do for fun was
I didn't necessarily imply that you lived it personally, but I'm sure you've known people who were stuck into it.
I do actually know the lifestyle and the implied, like you're supposed to. Well, it's just being a woman to a certain degree. You're expected to be when you're younger. Wasn't it like this everywhere? There's a certain degree of vapidity is expected.
Well, it's not even, it's not so much that. It's that in Southern California, there's a stereotypical Southern California lifestyle. And the prettier you are, the more you're supposed to be living it. Now, after you grow up, you're supposed to live a different way. But from what I can tell is that Katie Hill just never stopped living that lifestyle.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't know enough. Again, I can't agree with you or disagree with you because I don't know enough about her, but I know exactly what the fuck you're talking about. And I'm being cautious in saying that and like couching it because I don't want to like go and look at her her record and be like, oh shit, I actually like her. Something like that. But yeah, no, I know exactly the type you're talking about. I lived in fear, like absolute terror when I was a young teenager of growing up to be one of those women because I thought they were deeply sad. And in fact, you saw a lot of those women at the Capitol because that was the first time in their adult life that they had ever felt anything. I
get the feeling that she's not deeply happy. I mean, obviously there was something wrong in her marriage. Her husband was an asshole. They were both, despite having a quote unquote open marriage, she was having a covert affair because her husband was such a jerk.
Yeah, I've been in those kinds of open relationships too, where they get to do what they want. But you have to like, yeah, they never last very long, which is good.
But yeah, and that seems to be, but that specific aspect to her marriage was then used to spike her public political career as soon as it became inconvenient for all the people who don't want to admit that politicians were ever young, or at least that women were ever young.
Right.
And
all these people on the right to far right who have resigned over sex scandals of some sort, right? Like what's his name? Liberty University. What the fuck is his name? Like
Falwell?
Oh, I can't remember. You know,
Falwell Jr. Gary Falwell Jr. quit Liberty University over the pool boy.
Yeah, that was it. And it's like over that? Like, really? That's it? I mean, like, how sad is that? That he felt that he had to quit over a fucking sex scandal. I mean, of all things, it's just so repressive. I mean, he should have quit over the fucking class scandal. He should have quit over, being a grifter. He should have quit over being an immoral fucking hypocrite. But a pool boy or whatever. I mean, was he a pool boy?
You got to remember the pool boy is a very bad look for Jerry Falwell Jr.
Mm-hmm. Because he made all his grift off being the family values guy. And he was the one who was brought down by the repression that he created. So in one sense, it was perfectly appropriate. But in another, it's just sad and depressing that people want a world like that. God, I sound like a fucking bleeding heart. Sorry.
Well, well, keep in mind, 3 generations of absolutely horrible Brent Bozels.
Oh my God! Right. Jesus Christ.
Each one worse than the one before him.
Well, maybe this one, won't have
Brett Bozell the fourth will come along and maybe be a liberal.
No, I sound like a eugenicist. Oh no!
We're back to it.
And the other thing that I wanted to talk about border stuff more.
Oh yeah.
And now we're almost done, but Biden on the border has turned out to be such a disappointment. Well, on anything genocide related, not just the border, COVID, the border, prisons, crime, cops.
I gotta say that COVID was an improvement over Trump because, vaccines became more available.
Well, so let's talk about that.
But the fucking border stuff. At least they reversed.
Let's talk about what was or wasn't an improvement over Trump. So this is important. Most people may not actually know this because MSNBC stopped putting the death numbers on the screen after Biden became president.
Way up.
Biden's numbers for his first 100 days, which aren't even over yet, if those ended up being his pace for the whole year, more people are going to die than died under Trump.
I know. I'm sincerely hoping that's not the case. I'm hoping.
But he's talking about opening up schools,
opening up businesses. Oh yeah, well if you get, if you're vaccinated, you'll still get it, but it won't.
So I've mentioned this a few can never mention on camera enough. So the CDC wants us to believe that kids are safe 3 feet apart in schools.
Is that what they're saying now? 3 feet?
What the CDC is saying. Now, keep in mind that if the CDC had said something like that under Trump, we would all be, oh, they're lying. He's making them lie. But MSNBC wants us to treat 3 feet apart in schools as a legitimate thing.
It's insane.
So now let's keep in mind that the 6 feet that we've all been told is probably bullshit.
Right.
And
somebody
the reason
that up, right? Didn't they admit? Like somebody admitted.
Well, so here's the reason that restaurants were closed in New York and almost everywhere else that people have decided to be sane at all is that there was very good studies showing that the coronavirus easily travels up to 20 feet indoors.
Yeah. Oh, and there was all that denial for a long time over whether or not it was an aerosol or a disease. I just
want to say, oh, it's not airborne. It's not airborne. It's not airborne. And then it's airborne.
It's a respiratory disease.
Well, so there's a difference between airborne and aerosol, which is actually very, very subtle. So if something is an aerosol, I have to cough phlegm on you.
Yeah.
It may not, depending on how virulent it is, and it may not have to be very much. But for it to be for an aerosol, you have to get that fluid on you.
Ugh.
Airborne,
I've spent way too much
you
time
just have to breathe in someone else's air.
Right. But it was obvious that it was airborne from very early on. I mean, to even the most casual observer. And the gaslighting around this shit has been extremely, not just from the fucking far right either.
No, and that's the whole
really
thing.
Disheartening.
They're gaslighting us just as much now under Biden.
Oh, no, it's worse.
Yeah.
It's fucking worse. Because what my colleagues are doing, and I don't even know if I can call them colleagues anymore, but I'll call them colleagues because I like holding their fucking feet to the fire. They have gone straight to pretending, most of them have gone straight to pretending the Trump administration didn't even happen.
There was an AP tweet that talked about how employment was getting ready to reach a post-COVID high.
Jesus fuck. Post-COVID.
And I'm saying to myself, post-COVID?
Yeah.
What
are you doing?
That's any number. Any given number is a post-COVID high.
Yeah. But more than that, they're talking about post-COVID while we're still in the middle of the plague. And this is the Associated Press.
Yeah, this is what I don't like about the Biden administration. Everything is being swept under the rug.
It's weird because everything is. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It's simultaneously like shit. The shit that should be being paid attention to is getting swept under the rug. But then there's other shit that I believe doesn't even warrant any coverage. Like, I don't know, the dog bit somebody or something. And then
Well, no,
all these reporters.
I'll tell you what I think doesn't warrant any coverage, and this will be what all the liberals will jump on me for if many liberals actually watch this show. That stupid alleged Russian hack of that stupid software company that was putting out software that didn't work anyway and was basically making money off a grift on the federal government. And we're putting sanctions on Putin now, new sanctions on Putin and Russia for a hack of a software company that wasn't doing anything useful anyway. They were basically just grifting off the government with a failed product.
Yeah, but I think there's shit that's still. I don't have any insider.
They're protecting the grift. That's the whole thing. My belief more than anything else. It's like the Democratic Party. They didn't care. They didn't care that all these people were evil. They cared that all these people's evil secrets were being released by the Russians.
It's so blatant at this point, isn't it?
And they said, well, you can't believe that because it came from the server hack. But that's the whole point. It came from the server hack, so we know it was all real. Otherwise, why would it have been on the DNC server? But they want to say that because it came from the hack, we shouldn't listen to it. It's like, well, it came from the hack. That means it's true. We should know about this stuff. They shouldn't have been keeping it secret in the first place.
Right. Yeah. It's just, I think something ugly, big and ugly is going to be coming out because of what I don't know. I don't know what.
You remember what the big ugly what the big ugly was? The big secret that they were trying to hide with the Democratic server and the CrowdStrike stuff?
Oh fuck, I can't remember.
It turns out after everything, the big secret of CrowdStrike is that Nancy Pelosi's husband is one of the big owners.
Oh, was that it?
Yeah, but that's a big deal because Nancy Pelosi was the Democratic minority leader. Her husband is this big Wall Street investment guy, and a security company owned by the husband of the Democratic minority leader is contracting with the DNC. It's a huge bundle of conflicts of interest and graft. They cared more about hiding the conflicts of interest and the graft than they did about anything else.
That's what I mean. Like, is that it?
That's what they cared about. And that's what you're going to see with this software company. We're going to find out that they're covering up for the grift.
I hope you're wrong. Because that idea, that reality is so depressing to contemplate.
Think about it. Can't
it just be something juicy this time?
But
not think about tired old grift.
But think about the juicy stuff, though. All the juicy stuff. I mean, juicy stuff requires there to be something happening. Our government isn't capable of doing things? I mean, they can't do anything that doesn't involve deregulating some corporation somehow. If it involves loosening regulations so a corporation can do it, sure, they're there. But they don't know how to do anything with the government anymore.
Well, to that I would say more to myself than to you. But because every time I think this, I think, yeah, but times are changing. Young people are coming in. We've got all these engaged Zoomers who are.
Well, no. I think there's lots of good stuff in the future, but I mean, just right now, the people who control, the people who are keeping all these secrets are just.
There's fucking corporate control of goddamn everything.
I mean, and we're going to find out. We're going to find out that instead of a bunch of juicy foreign espionage stuff, it's going to be all this boring corporate corruption.
Yeah. And the thing about that, I mean, that's something that needs to be addressed. That's something that really needs to be out there and you need sunlight on it. But the problem with that, from my perspective as a journalist, is like the public doesn't care. And you can't make it what they call sexy. It's just not interesting. I mean, it's scandalous. It'll piss people off, but it pisses people off in the same fucking way they've been pissed off their whole lives because everybody's used to it. It's like people they care, but it's just like, well, business as usual, better the devil you know. And I don't know. I mean, other than a cultural change, which I think we're in the middle of.
And really, I mean, so that's what we have to do first. And that's why that's why I focus more on, well, this is what you need to know, and less, well, overthrow the government. I mean, sure, we all want to overthrow the government, but right now we really need to teach people how to change the culture, how to change the culture, how to think so that overthrowing the government can be possible.
I mean, well, I'm over 40, so anything I say about changing the system from within just sounds like a fucking old person saying it. So, I believe it's possible. I also believe that it's possible to not have to settle for fucking incremental change. So we have learned now that incremental change doesn't work, and it's possible to change things very quickly.
Sorry. I'm not going to give up on changing the system from within. Mm-hmm. The DSA taking over the Democratic Party in Nevada is really impressive, and I'm really happy, and I'm glad, and I'm hopeful. But and then we really have to wrap up after this. But
I didn't even get to talk about the border.
The one thing that I've really been leaning on a lot lately is the fact that there's this whole system in the Democratic Party where freshman Congress people are put to work as telemarketers, raising money for the DCCC and their leadership fund. And they're told you have to raise X money for the DCCC and you have to raise X money for your leadership fund to help other people get reelected. And you have to do this. This is your job. And for that freshman year in Congress, they spend more time cold calling donors than anything else. Now, how can someone who spends 2 years cold calling donors 48 hours a day asking for money for the party ever really fight back against it?
And that's a fair question. I mean, that's a legitimate criticism, and that's a really, really good point. And also, that's time that they could be spending building connections with their constituents.
It totally mm-hmm. stops them from building the kind of connections that would be useful to their constituents, and instead forces them to build the kinds of connections that will be useful to their donors.
Yeah. And I'm sure they see it as some kind of training period, or that's how it's sold. Sorry, Kennedy, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just agreeing.
But that's so the whole Democratic Party runs on corporate money and millionaire money and billionaire money.
More and more shit does, and it's fucking unnerving, and I don't like it, and I don't want to live in a world that is all completely owned by billionaires. I mean, I'm seeing it as I look around, I'm seeing it now, like the far right politics and the bullshit and the violence and the mass shootings. I see them all as one like gross teeming whole. But then I also see these billionaires buying shit out, and I think, well, this shit's being astroturfed. So who's astroturfing it? As they take over. They take over.
So here's our final thought for you guys. And both of you are free to answer about this before we sign off. Something for the audience to think about for the night. So billionaires have gotten massively richer than they were before COVID.
It is fucking gross.
J.B. Pritzker is the governor of Illinois. J.B. Pritzker is, to my knowledge, with Bloomberg being back to mostly retired, J.B. Pritzker is our only genuine billionaire politician. We all know Trump's not really a billionaire. So J.B. Pritzker, our only genuine billionaire politician, is governor of Illinois.
Oh, there's also West Virginia. What's his name?
Justice? Is he a billionaire?
Yeah, it's fucking coal money.
Oh, is he a coal billionaire?
He's a coal billionaire who comes from a coal billionaire family.
I did not know that.
West Virginia.
But anyway.
I swear to God. Okay, go ahead.
He's done better than Pritzker on COVID, though, which is just That's scary when Jim Justice is probably the best COVID governor in the country, but it's also probably true.
Yeah, it's also practical.
Yeah, well, yeah, but not one single other Republican governor has been practical. Even Democrats have had a hard time sticking to it consistently. But anyway, so billionaires are getting richer. Pritzker, though it hasn't gotten the news attention that Cuomo does, Pritzker has been one of the big failures on COVID policy as a governor. He lied about not having power to issue an executive order to stop utility shutoffs. It made the local Fox station, and because it made the local Fox station, the Intercept wrote it up. But his dicking around and putting his political relationships and legislative agenda over the COVID crisis has led to more people in Illinois dying than would have otherwise died if not for Pritzker's actions. So with that in mind, I want to ask, how much richer has J.B. Pritzker gotten because of COVID? Because we know billionaires have. All the billionaires are richer because of COVID. I want to know specifically, while he's been failing his state as governor, I want to know specifically how much richer J.B. Pritzker has gotten.
It's a good question. I got no answer. But I suppose we could find it. I mean, if he is an honest-to-God billionaire, that should be...
It should be possible for somebody to run down. Do any of us know journalists?
My phone's charging in the other room.
But yeah, no, I think that, and if you guys have any thoughts on that before we wrap, I think that's the...
I just want to say, I think a lot of the stuff that we've talked about tonight, follow the money is something that I learned a long time ago as I was starting to radicalize. And as much as I think a lot of people have learned it, I think it's a lesson that still bears repeating and reminding, and just, in situations like this, when we're looking at answers for why are our politicians behaving certain ways, look for a money reason first, because there's almost always one of those.
Yep, money or sex. And yeah, I mean, follow the money indeed. I've got no guess and no answer because I want to go look it up and do my research before I give you any.
Awesome.
But I also have found it extraordinarily disturbing how many elected officials and influencers said, basically, I mean, you saw how upsetting it was to me. They basically said, yeah, it's time to let grandma die because our stocks, the stock market needs it. We have to make sacrifices. You have to break some eggs to make an omelet. And that was not just coming from the right.
No.
I saw that coming from...
It was, hey, the kill grandpa order was signed by Andrew Cuomo.
Oh my God, that's right. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of disinformation run, recall and impeachment attempts going on in a lot of blue states, but they're using COVID as a pretext, but some of them are legitimate.
Well, it's like, so the Newsom recall.
Oh.
The Newsom recall is built almost entirely on complaints about COVID restrictions. Yep. But Gavin Newsom really is a crook who should be recalled.
Who really, really fucked up with the Frank Laundrie shit. I mean, and infuriated. I mean, the optics were terrible, and he brought Kimberly Guilfoyle into our lives. Like,
and let's talk about something. I still think this is the biggest scandal of all. The closest thing mainstream media has done to talk about it is give voice to a lady whose restaurant was shut down, but who was complaining about it. But you understand that Hollywood is an essential industry, right? And Hollywood is an essential industry because of Gavin Newsom. So people in the movie business, extras and grips, and I'm not even talking about the rich folks who make lots of money and who keep making lots of money because their movies keep being made, whether they're on-camera talent or whether they're an exec at the studio. But the working people who make movies are being put at risk in situations that are the same as things that other people in California have been told they can't do. Restaurants were made to close down outdoor dining in the winter, but movie productions were still doing outdoor dining. And so how much of COVID is worse because of the pass that was given to Hollywood?
I mean,
and that's a scandal nobody's talking about. I mean, we talk about celebrities getting sick every now and then, but we don't talk about why or or how they, and even more importantly, the little people who make a lot less money than they do are being endangered.
Well, they never do, right? It's never about the workers. It's always about the stars and the moneyed. If it was up to the people who are actually workers, we would be getting paid to stay home where it's safe. And we'd have homes, all of us, where it's safe. But anyway.
But I think since we've gone close to 2.5 hours now, I think we should actually wrap up. This is actually my longest show since that wasn't with my old partner. So
well, I'm happy to be a part of it. Thank you for letting me vent and tell pointless stories about
you are one of my favorite guests. I could not have you back.
It was great. Thank you, Kennedy. I'm sorry I talked over you so much. I think there's a little delay, or I've just lost all my social skills, or both, probably. I think both.
Could be a little of both, but no, there's usually a little bit of connection delay.
There's usually a certain amount of interruption and talking over each other every now and then. It's true.
I don't even know what to do with my face anymore. Once I start going out without a mask on anymore, whenever the fuck that might be, I'm gonna be like
I gotta stop sticking my tongue out at people now.
I'm excited because right now lipstick has become kind of worthless.
Oh my god! You know, I do like a half-hour show every week for Dame magazine. It's like a Facebook watch thing. Like 10 people watch it, but it's an excuse to pile on a bunch of lipstick. So every week I'm like, oh, it's 10:30.
No, I can't say. I don't know. I have no idea how many people are actually watching us. I do this so I can talk to cool people.
Yeah, I never pay attention to any of that because I just get intimidated and nervous. So it's like, you know, it's even better if it's kind of a bummer that I have to look at myself. It's even better that if I could just see you two and I could just pretend it's the three of us just hanging out. And then like, yeah.
Well, hey, I mean, you guys are totally welcome to come to Portland and hang out once the plague is over.
Oh, fuck yes.
Oh yeah.
Wait, which Portland is it again? Maine or
Oregon?
Oh, okay. Yeah, fuck yes. Much shorter flight.
Much. Plus, you know, it's the legal pot, Portland.
And where are you, Kennedy? That's true.
Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Oh, cool. Mm-hmm. That's my favorite city I've spent like one day of my life in. It's just absolutely beautiful around there.
I love it.
I know.
I've never been to Albuquerque because when we moved out, we did the long run through the bottom half of the state. So you go through all the desert towns.
Oh,
Gallup and Tucumcari and everything.
Oh yeah, so much to see in Gallup.
But yeah, no. So I think that's a good spot to wrap up. Finally, I appreciate you guys sticking it out with me.
Well,
I appreciate anybody who's still watching too.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you for letting me air my grievances. Although I barely scratched the surface, I have so many more that I know.
I'm gonna invite you back again, so you don't have to worry about that.
All right, cool. I still haven't talked about eugenics as much as I wanted to.
Yeah, no.
I wanted to talk about that more too. So
yeah,
we'll definitely have to do that.
Okay.
Definitely.
Next time for sure.
Definitely. Right. And yeah, the closest I came was pointing out that Greenwald appears to be for it now. But
dude, I heard some weird stuff about him and his husband. Yeah, they're married now, right? His husband.
They're married.
That when they were like, I don't know. So
they married when his husband was 20.
No, it wasn't that. It was porn stuff. It was
Well, I
like
don't know.
intent to manufacture a scandal where he met him in a porn company or something.
Well, I don't know
I did
anything
hear that
about
one
that.
too.
What I know is that his husband was 20 when they got married, and that there are questions about how old his husband was when they first met.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I heard that one.
And it raises the sort of, well, was he waiting for somebody to come of age to start a relationship? Because that's just creepy.
God. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's actually worse than I was considering.
But I mean, that's the thing yeah. But it's
Anyway, yeah.
it is. But it also, the two people who were defending Matt Gaetz are Glenn Greenwald and Alan Dershowitz.
Alan fucking Dershowitz, of course he was.
We know why
The
Alan
Dersh.
Oh God, nobody asked Dersh, and yet there you are.
And on that note, folks, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. See you next time.
Tonight we had Brooke Binkowski and Kennedy Cooper, and I'm grateful to both of you. Again, I'm Chris Richards, the Eclectic Radical. I hope everybody has a great night. I'll tweet at you.